Welcome to Painting with Yuk-Sem. Today we're going to be doing a holiday scene with a Christmas tree in front of the galaxy. So just like when we did the galaxy in the other episode, I'm going to get the acrylic paint, adding some water. I'm going to start with just a little bit of white in the middle of my canvas, and that's just going to allow me to blend that paint a little bit better. If ever you get a hair, all you do is use your brush, run it against it, and then you can get it. If you try and get it with your finger, you'll mess up your painting, or you'll never get it off and you'll be chasing it all around your canvas. So that's always a helpful hint. So I'm going right into our dark blue. I have my white on the canvas, and I'm going to add that color. I'm not worried about where it's going or what direction. I'm just getting some coverage and getting it blended in there. Grab a bit more white, add it on the outside, because I want to work quickly on getting that galaxy on the background, because I want it to be wet enough that I can blend those colors. Now that I've finished with the blue, I'm going to come in with that purple. Get that a little bit everywhere, and I'm just following my strokes. Sometimes it's over, making sure that I have coverage around all the spaces that I want. So now that I have that basically done, and it's been only a few minutes, what I can do is wash off my brush. And with a clean brush, if you come in and you start blending on top of those colors, the paint is still wet enough that it'll blend. So I'm using the crisscross motion of those little X's, and when you start doing that, that's how you get that mottled effect of the color blending in the colors. So if I wanted to bring some purple in, I just grab it and pull it down into the blue, bring the blue up a little bit more, going over where I see that the paint is really wet. I know that that'll blend really easy, so I can go and get some of that purple and bring it up into that blue. The biggest thing when you're blending is to try and watch for any areas where you're seeing a big crisscross, or you see smears of paint, and you really want to try and get that blended in somehow. Even if you have to come in after. I get some of these areas. I left some of the dark purple, but now I want a few areas of dark blue. So right here, you see that there's a lot of that purple that's gone on top, but doesn't have a lot of that blue left. So I'm just going to add the blue right to it. And because that paint's still wet, it should blend pretty easily. And you can just keep on adding whatever colors you want onto that area. So if you want it a bit lighter, let's add a bit of white. Give the impression of that moon, let's say, back there. Blending that all the way into that purple. Now I'm going to come and grab some of the black and start blending the black into the purple. I'm going to make sure that I wash all of that white out of there, because down here I don't mind having a bit of the white, but I do want a lot more of that black instead of that gray. I'll get a bit more of the purple, bring that down. Not worrying too much about the background, because most of it's going to be covered when I do do the scene in front. So I never try and spend, I want a nice background and it to be good so that it's not too noticeable after, but I never spend too much time, because by the time you get the subject in front of it and all the details, then, you know, it really does just blend into the background, and you don't notice it as much. So don't stay and be too worried about it. So again, you get a bit more black and start doing that top corner. Same thing, the paint's a little bit wet still, so I can just come in here and blend that black in with the purple, grabbing a bit of the purple to make it a little bit easier. Add a bit of the dark to that corner. And if you remember, one of the tricks for if you're painting at the bottom of your canvas and you're having trouble because of your easel, take your canvas, flip it around, get that corner there. Nobody's going to know if you flipped your canvas around or not. It's all about making it easier. It doesn't have to stay the same way all the time. So I'm just making sure that all those white spots are covered. I got a nice blend. Flip that canvas back around. Get rid of my fingerprint right up there. And I can add just a bit more black down here, I think. All right, we have the basic shape now for the background. One of the things that we're going to do is give kind of an abstract take on the galaxy. So I'm going to wash off that brush. I'm going to come in with the smaller. So it's a round brush, but it's still fairly soft. So what I'm going to come and do is grab a bit of that cobalt green. And in a couple of the areas, I'm just going to give the impression of a couple of treetops. And this is just to start getting that feeling of doing the downward V and feathering it out. They might get covered in the end by the tree, but by the main tree, but it'll just give me an idea of what I want to do and get you used to doing that paint stroke. Now I'm going to go and get a little bit more of that cobalt green, and I'm not going to worry if the paint blends in with the green, because that'll be okay. It'll just add to the effect. So I'm going to start at the top and feather out. And I'm going to do the same thing the other side. And I'm always overlapping in the front and coming back out and just building the layers of the branches as I go. And it'll just naturally pick up some of that under painting of the background and add it and give you a few different tones and highlights on that tree. So don't be worried using the wet on wet and getting some of that texture and color, and let it work to your advantage. Don't be worried about it too much. Usually it ends up looking okay. So all I'm doing is feathering it out. See here, there's a little bit more purple. I kind of like that in a streak of blue, and that's fine. As I get closer to the bottom, what I'm going to do is add just a bit of black into it, so that now I start getting some shadow in the bottom of that tree. On this side, let's add just a few more brush strokes to to add some shadow in there. Kind of like that. I'm going to wash off my brush. Now we're going to use the fan brush again. So the fan brush is just like the normal brush, except for it's pinched and flattened out. And what it does is that it flattens it into that fan shape, but gives you a really nice feathered look on it. So it's a little bit intimidating to start using it, but once you've gotten used to it, and the more you use it, the better it'll be. So I'm picking up some black and some of that cobalt green, because I'm going to start with the underpainting of it, which means that now we're going to start building towards the top, so the bottom branches. So just where those feathers were, I'm going to just start dabbing and adding some actual branches, and I'm just dabbing and feathering it out. And with the fan brush, it just naturally creates that brushed branches without too much effort. Instead of going in and really trying to get every branch in there, the fan brush gives us that impression of those brush strokes just by having it all separated like that. Now that I've tried it on the bottom and you've gotten that technique a little bit better, then you can come in and now with a bit less black and a little bit more cobalt green, we're going to come in and you can start layering those top branches. And again, it's more of the dabbing and the back and forth motion in order to get. See, and all of the underpainting is still there. It makes a big difference. Even though you think you're painting over it, it's still going to be underneath there, and you'll be able to see. Because if I were to do the same thing but not have all of that underneath, there's a lot of that background that'll be poking through, and then that's not the effect that I wanted. So when it gets to the center of your tree, all you do is feather it out a little bit, because you have those branches that live in the front here. So some of them are actually going to be flat and coming out like that. You know, have one or two branches that come down. Something like that. I'm going to grab a bit of the dark and really work on some of that shadow underneath here, getting some definition on those bottom branches. All right. While I have my fan brush out, I'm just going to do the same thing now. With the trees in the background, I'm just going to come in, use the corner of it, and then start fanning it out. Again, just use the corner, come down, and then straighten it out. And that will give you the really easy top of a tree. I have another one over here, corner, and then slowly turn it so that now your fan brush is coming down on it. All right. Now we're going to go and add some snow. I'm going to make sure that my brush is nice and clean, because the last thing you want is to have gray snow on your painting. It'll already pick up some of the wet paint, and that'll be fine, but I just didn't want too much of it on there. So I'm just going in, and with the fan brush, I'm going into the white. And if you wanted to start again in the middle, just to be able to get the feel of it, because a lot of people, when they look at it, they'll notice the top, won't notice so much of the bottom, the middle area, because we can cover that up a little bit and stuff, and then get a really nice design there. So as you're coming down with we'll start in the middle, and I'm adding snow. So I'm noticing where the branch is, and I'm just dabbing my brush, making sure that I'm watching where those the bristles are. And what it does is that it adds that really nice texture to it that you don't have to go in and worry too much about making a whole bunch of brush strokes, because the fan brush will just do the work for you. So it always helps to have a bit of water or medium in your paint when you're doing this, so that you're getting that nice coverage and it's not too thick and putting in the too many big gobs of paint. Using your fan brush to your advantage, and once you get used to it, then you'll see that you'll just never go back to using a regular brush for any of your branches and your trees. So as these branches in the front, remember that they're not just side branches on a tree, there's some in the front and some in the back. So the ones in the front here, sometimes they're just going to be horizontal and with a tip, and that's what's going to pick up the snow. So don't be afraid to just make a couple of those branches in the front that aren't bending over to the side. So I'm just going to add some snow to the tops of these, wherever I had those branches normally that came out. I'm just adding to the top of it. And if you go just a bit higher in your branch, nobody will know that you're actually on the branch or over it. So that's another way to be less specific and a little bit sneaky in how you're doing your painting. So now that I know how I have that coverage and how to play with that, getting a little bit more on those big branches there. So now I can come into the top and really start controlling that brush and adding snow to the top. Making sure that I don't forget that it's not only branches that come out to the side. And that's one of the biggest mistakes when people are starting to do trees, is that they'll do the trunk and then they'll do all the branches on the side and do those really nice, but then forget that there's a middle. So it looks like a cross section. So in order to get that fullness, it really is about practicing those front branches here and making sure you don't forget them. As you can tell, like just adding from the tip on one of the corners and then coming down, it's just really easy to let the brush, by moving it back and forth, create that tree for you. Alright, let's do another big branch that got some snow down there. So now we have the basic shape of our Christmas tree. I'm going to wash that brush off, and then we're going to start adding some stars and some Christmas lights. So I'm going to use a small detail brush. I'm going to go into I'm going to start with the red, and the way that I'm going to do this is that I'm really going to try and space them out and hit more or less where the green is, because red and green are complementary colors. The reason why that is that the three primary colors are blue, red, and yellow. If you mix two of the colors, that'll make, so if you mix blue and yellow, that makes green. The one that's left over is red, and that's complementary. So when your eye sees those colors side by side, it really jumps out. So I'm making them different sizes. And just adding little circles. They don't have to be perfect. Just adding a few of them so that it really stands out to be a Christmas one. If you left it just like that, it could be just a winter scene, but I like the holiday season. I really like painting different sceneries that help me get me into the the Christmas spirit. So after I have that, now I'm going to start with the yellow. Just going to make sure that I get some cadmium yellow and add just a few small dots so it looks like lights that are in that tree. There. It just fills in a couple of the branches, gives you that idea of perspective, that there may be something like on the other side, and playing around with that a little bit. And now we can start in with the stars. So there's a couple of ways to do the stars. You can use your brush and you can splatter paint it. I like being a little bit more conscientious of where they're going. So what I like to do is get that nice liquid paint. So there's 5 things, different things that you can notice with stars. The first one is the size. So you can have small stars and then you can have bigger stars. So you can play with the size. The next one is playing with the number. So you can play with having 1 and then having 2, having a group of 3, and even a group of 4. So you play with the number of stars you put down. The next thing that you can remember is where are you putting them. As you notice, when I was painting, I'm moving around my canvas. If you paint always starting in the same place, even if you're painting in groups and changing the size, it will never look as natural as if you jump around your canvas and you just try and fill in some spots. So groups of 2, 1, maybe a little line of 3. So now we're playing with size, with the number of them, their placement, and then you can also play around with constellations. And I will not pretend to know what the constellations are. I'll leave that for the astronomers. But then you can play with grouping them together. And then the last thing that I like to do is I'll show you right over here. Let's say there's a star that maybe I don't like. It went too big and it really bothers me. I like to turn it into a shooting star. So what I'll do is I'll paint it. If I don't like it, I'll come in, just smear it with my finger, redo the front end of it, and then it turns into a shooting star. And if you do a couple of those in your sky, that's, well, I'll just get a bit more paint on that one. So you just turn it into a shooting star, redo the front of it. And then the last one is, the last way to do stars is if you get a really watered down white and you paint the first star bigger and just dab it a little bit, right? So you're getting almost that washed out effect, and then you put the others, another star in the middle, then it starts to look like it's glowing. So that's the 5th way that I like to play with stars, is that every once in a while I'll put one on there. It's a little bit messy, but that's all right. And I'll make them glow. And right around here, we're going to use that to our advantage. To make one glow right on top there. And you can do as many rings around it as you'd like. Just playing around with, sometimes it's about taking off the paint. That gives you a really nice effect. And playing around with that, I'm going to get really nice bright white. Put that in the center to give you that effect there. So now I'm going to just fill in a couple of our spots, remembering to play with size, some of them small, some of them bigger. Play with groups. Sometimes there's 2 or 3 closer together. Sometimes they're all alone. You can find a place where maybe he needs a friend. And then placement on the canvas, how to fix, makes those shooting stars. Sometimes you just want to make a little galaxy out there. So if you use your finger and you just stamp and you just keep on stamping, that works too. All right, let's see what we have left. So down here, I think I'm going to need a bit of a tree. So I'm going to go in with my brush, my fan brush, grab a bit of the green, add a nice little buddy for this guy. Over here, pick up some black, do the shading, wash that off. Well, you just never know sometimes the way that your painting's going to go and what you have room for and what will happen. You just got to let it kind of take a life of its own. Oh, and my brush was a little bit fuzzy. So here, if it's something that you didn't like, nobody knows, just come back in and make it a little bit bigger. There's some snow that lives on there. Because it just takes you a few minutes to start painting, and the more you paint, the more you know how to fix your mistakes. And I think that a big part of being an artist and having those nice finished pieces isn't necessarily always that you know more about painting. You just know more about how to fix your happy mistakes. Over here, I'll just do another treetop. Get a bit of that green in there. And I think we're almost done. So you can play around whether you want it to stay in winter scene, if you wanted to add a bit more into the galaxy, take away some of those other ones, add a few more black trees back there. But to make that forest look, it's all up to you. It's your painting. You can have fun with it and just make it your own. See what happens. Give it a chance. And just like that, we'll call that one done. So thank you for painting with me. I hope that you have fun and have some happy holidays and enjoy painting the winter tree, whether it has the Christmas decorations or not. I hope that you have fun painting it, and we'll see you next time.